What's up, gamers? So this is going to be a quick little mini rant video because I have been hearing a lot of people complaining about the price point of the Nintendo eShop releases of Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen versions. Okay, so first of all, the rumor that has been floating around for the last week or so is that these re-releases were going to be going for $30 a pop. So you're telling me that you heard this rumor that they were re-releasing Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen for $30, and then when the actual announcement comes, they tell you that it's only $20, and you're mad about that? They could have released them for $30. Hell, they could have released them for $40 if they really, really wanted to. So I think that $20 is actually a somewhat reasonable price for this re-release. And also, let's be real. If in an alternate timeline, let's say they released these games for $15 a piece, you know people would still be complaining about it. Hell, they'd probably still be complaining about it if it was only $10 a piece. In fact, I remember way back in the day, watching the Jimquisition, if you guys remember that show, and hearing the dude complain about NES releases on the Nintendo Virtual Console being $5 and how those games should be being sold for a quarter a pop. So really, even if it was only $5 dues, hell, even if it was only $3 dues, you know people would still be complaining about the price, because, you know, people just love to bitch and moan about whatever they can on the internet these days. Now, my next point is that these aren't just any Pokemon games. They are the original Pokemon games. Not just the original Pokemon games, but the definitive versions of the original Red and Blue version. And from what I remember, they were really freaking good. And they also added a lot of new content with the Seville Islands, or Sevi Islands, however you pronounce it. It's basically the Orange League from the anime, but in video game form. There's also the fact that there's a high possibility that these re-releases are going to include the events from the original game that allowed you to do things like capture Deoxys or Lugia. And I think that if those are included, which is something you can't experience on an original cartridge unless you use like an action replay or something, then that would definitely make it worth the price for a lot of people. Speaking of the original cartridges, there's also the fact that Pokemon cartridges are notorious for batteries failing, which causes certain features of the games to not work correctly, so that's another repair you have to pay for, on top of the, I think, $100+ it costs for a GBA era cart. In fact, I was actually just in a retro game store the other day, and I saw a complete in box copy of Pokemon Leaf Green. And you want to know how much it cost? What, you think $300? Maybe $400? No. $500 dues for Pokemon Leaf Green complete in box. So the fact that they're only selling this for $20, and yeah, I know it's like, okay, well, the loose cart goes for $100, so they could justify selling it for $80 or $90, but that's not what they did. They released it for $20 a pop, and there's also a chance that it might go on sale in the future. So I think just having easy access to these extremely rare, valuable games is going to be a big deal to a lot of people. And then, you know, there's also just the convenience of having it on the Switch and Switch 2 ecosystem, and the fact that it's going to have Pokemon Home compatibility, right? Because let's say if you have an original cartridge for FireRed and you want to play through that and then transfer all your Pokemon from that up to the newest Pokemon games. Okay, well, for starters, you're going to have to get a whole bunch of other Pokemon games, like at least one Gen 4 game, at least one Gen 5 game, at least one Gen 6 game, and then I think both Gen 6 and 7 are compatible with Pokemon Bank, which you can only get on a 3DS, which allows you to transfer over to Pokemon Home, and then you need You might need an original DS. Actually, now that I think about it, you might be able to just do that with a 3DS alone. But either way, 3DSs are getting expensive these days, so if you don't already have one, that's more money you have to spend. Oh, no, wait, that's right, you do need to get an original DS, because only the original DS had the cartridge slot for Game Boy Advance games in order to transfer them over into a Gen 4 game. And then even if you have all the hardware you need to make the transfers, you still have to play that stupid minigame that Gen 4 had that only let you transfer up to six Pokemon a day. And there's also the possibility that you could fail the minigame, which means you'd have to keep retrying it until you capture all of your Pokemon again in the new 4th generation game. Then you'd have to play around with the DS's clock in order to transfer more than 6 Pokemon a day. Then you gotta transfer those Pokemon into a Gen 5 game, which are also very expensive, even more expensive than the Gen 3 games, if I recall correctly. And then, that had its own bullshit you had to deal with. And then you had to transfer those Pokemon up into Gen 6, and you'd have to just go through all of this BS just to get your Pokemon from Gen 3 all the way up to the newest gen, right? So I think for a lot of people, paying $20 to just have FireRed and LeafGreen in the Switch ecosystem and not have to deal with all that bullshit and be able to transfer as many Pokemon as you want into Pokemon Home, per day is going to be worth it for a lot of people. There's also the fact that people have been complaining about the lack of a virtual console on the Switch systems, since the Switch first came out. I remember back in the day, a lot of people were mad that they replaced the virtual console with the subscription service that you get with NSO Online, and, they've been complaining, like, we want the virtual console back. Well, here you go. Here's Nintendo, sort of, in a limited capacity, giving you the virtual console back by allowing you to purchase these Pokemon games and just have them forever, digitally, assuming that they're still installed on your console whenever, their online services get shut out like 10 years from now, or 15 years from now, whatever it is. You can just pay for these games once, and you have access to them whenever you want, and you don't have to worry about maintaining your subscription service. And, they're giving you what you want, or what you claim you want, yet you're still gonna bitch up a storm about it? And, going back to the price point, people spend $20 at Panera Bread or Five Guys for one visit for a meal that ends after about 15-20 minutes. People will spend $20 to go to the movies for an experience that's only about 2 hours long. Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen are very deep, extensive RPGs that could easily clock in to 60, 80, even over 100 hours, depending on how much you play them. And I think that if we're going by the amount of hours per money you're paying, then yeah, FireRed and LeafGreen at $20 is a pretty decent deal. Would it have been better if it was $15? Of course. Would it have been better if it was only $10? Sure it would. But of course, people would still be complaining about it anyway. So, with all of that said, me personally, I just want to wait until the Pokemon presents so we can get confirmation that they're going to be including the event items in this game, which I'm pretty sure, there's like a 90% chance that's going to happen, considering that with the Virtual Console release of Pokemon Crystal, they included the event for Celebi, which was previously inaccessible outside of Japan. So yeah, I think there's a high possibility we're going to be seeing the event items in this re-release. And again, being able to access those events legitimately without an action replay, I think is going to be worth the price for a lot of people. Now, one thing that I do think is kind of a bummer about this release is the fact that there's not going to be any online play. Like, even if they didn't make like a new GTS for this, it still would have been cool to like go on a Discord server and find people doing PvP or people who want to trade. But hey, at least the local wireless functions work, so functionality wise, everything you could do with the original games with a Game Boy Advance and a link cable is going to be there, except transferring your Pokemon into Pokemon Coliseum and Gale of Darkness, which, as far as I'm aware, are only going to be released on the NSO subscription, which, that's another point I want to bring up. I think it's very likely that in the future we'll also see similar re-releases like this for Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, which I think that would be, that in itself would be really nice for a lot of the same reasons I've mentioned with FireRed and LeafGreen. But I would also really love to see standalone releases for Pokemon Coliseum and Pokemon Gale of Darkness, separate from the NSO service where you can just pay money to have the game forever. That way, we could have the full Gen 3 experience unlocked on Switch, where you can transfer your Pokemon from FireRed to Pokemon Coliseum and vice versa, and you can also do the same thing with the Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald re-releases that I'm sure we're going to get sooner or later. Now, I'm sure that's not going to happen, but if it did, that people would also be complaining about the price. Oh, they want $40 for a GameCube game? Are they crazy? It's just people like to complain. Anyway, if you think that $20 is too much for a Game Boy Advance game, then just don't buy it. And likewise, if you do think it's worth it, then go ahead and get the game and don't let anyone try and guilt you out of it. So yeah, there's my 2 cents on this whole FireRed LeafGreen situation. I've been Toasty Togu, and if anything I said in this video pissed you off, then keep crying, because I'm going to gather up all your tears in a jar and use them to lube up my dick when I jerk off. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.